Welcome, everybody. Today, I'm honored to have the opportunity to interview my sister colleague, Robin, about her journey as a Black woman autoethnographer, scholar, and educator. I'd like to begin by sharing a brief bio. Dr. Robin Boylorn is professor of interpersonal and intercultural communication at the University of Alabama. Her research is grounded in issues of social identity and social justice, centering the lived experience of Black women in the American South. She is the author of Sweetwater, Black Women and Narratives of Resilience, co-writer of the Crump Feminist Collection, and co-editor of Critical Autoethnography, Intersecting Cultural Identities in Everyday Life, and the recently published collection of Advances in Autoethnography and Narrative Inquiry, Reflections on the Legacy of Carolyn Ellis and Arthur Bachner. Her interdisciplinary and public scholarship has been featured in both academic and popular press venues. She is a public commentator for Alabama Public Radio, a contributor to the Remix by the Crunk Feminist Collective, and editor of Communication and Critical Cultural Studies, a premier journal of the National Communication Association. Quote, "If ignorance is bliss, then my life has been tragic, marked by the realization that despite my attempts to define myself, I'm often reduced to what the world says I am." When I read these words in Sweetwater, I was spun back through my own life like a Black girl fast dancing with time. Although I was born and raised in the inner city, my ancestors on both sides moved from the South in the early 1900s. And the stories in Sweetwater helped me reconnect with my Southern ancestry. Sweetwater is a journey through life in a country town, through the experiences of its women. In it, Robin returns home, a trained scholar seeking to reconnect with her hometown family in order to gather their stories and to tell her own. Sweetwater portrays Black women as we are, powerful, loving, intelligent, confused, challenged, resilient, and in the end, hopeful for a better day for ourselves and our families. Like ancient and contemporary African griots, Robin is a storyteller, a keeper of the keys to part of our history, a scholar who has taken up the journey of making certain, like Zora Neale Hurston before her, that our stories are not only not forgotten, but are recorded, published, and accessible to anyone interested in knowing more about the complexities of the experiences of Black women in the United States. Next, I'd like to share an excerpt from Sweetwater. Quote, "There's not much killing in the bottom on the outside, but many folk are dying on the inside or killing each other with meanness, spite, and unforgiveness. If it wasn't for the sin of suicide, maybe they would kill themselves. Nobody seemed willing to take that chance. Self-inflicted murder was never immediate or deliberate. It happened slowly and softly with liquor and bad habits. Unnatural dying happened by accident. Though there were stories of women being murdered by drunken boyfriends, fed up wives putting roots on deadbeat husbands, and men who owed money to bookies being set on fire. The thing about a community as small as Sweetwater is that there is no place to hide your secrets." Robin, will you begin by sharing with us why Sweetwater was such an important book for you to write?
Thank you for that beautiful, generous introduction and reading. I think that that passage in and of itself kind of reflects why I felt Sweetwater was so important. It was such an important part of me. It was almost as if I was not going to be able to tell my own stories without telling those first. And because so much of who I am and what I know is grounded in that history and legacy of that place and of those women. So, and you know, and I've talked about and kind of thought about how invisible those types of stories were for me. How I didn't know Black women writers existed for much of the earlier parts of my life. I read stories by and about white women. And so those were a lot of the, so when I would write stories, I was writing stories about blonde haired white women, white girls. And, but their experiences were a complete and utter departure from mine, an escape. Um, and that made me a fiction writer. And Sweetwater made me an autoethnographer.
Okay, all right. So when you talk about writing about white women, you make me think about Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Did that book have any impact on you as an autoethnographer and scholar, Black woman?
Absolutely. That is my favorite novel. It oftentimes goes between The Bluest Eye and Sula with my Toni Morrison fangirling. But reading The Bluest Eye was so resonant, so achingly, hauntingly relevant and resonant that I felt like she was somehow telling my own story. And that impacted me in the way that I wanted to then create art like that. I wanted to write stories that would make Black girls like me feel seen. And I would write stories that would translate trauma
Yes.
in more empowering ways. So especially because of the ways that trauma is often isolated and kept secret. The Bluest Eye kind of tells us how healing is only possible when the unspoken thing is spoken. So that is kind of the thing that echoes in the work that I do. I try to tell the unspoken thing, the taboo thing, the the uncomfortable thing, but the truth, right? The unmitigated truth at the same time.
All right. Did where I know it's a pseudonym, but why did you call it Sweetwater?
That name, so I came across, I had like this list of names of words for stories. Sweetwater was not one of them.
Okay.
Dirty water was. And and so I kind of thought about that and kind of situating these stories as dirty laundry, as unclean. But I also thought about how sweetness was the goal,
yes,
the outcome. And so I decided, so I kind of translated dirty water to Sweetwater as the place, as the setting for this story. And to kind of represent how, home is bittersweet and going
yes.
home is bittersweet. I was recently there and it's so different. It's almost entirely different. And even the interior of the home I grew up in has been renovated to where it's nearly unrecognizable, right? But I think that Sweetwater was a way of me kind of acknowledging the dirty and the sweet at the same time. I'm still going to write something called Dirty Water. It's a short story brewing around that as well.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to read it. And when you do, and then one other question about home and the book. Have you spoken with anyone back home who read the book? And if so, what did they say about it?
That's actually one of my favorite things about Sweetwater. One of the things I write about in the introduction is how challenging it was at first. my family, they're not, they're not a reading bunch. They don't do a whole lot of reading. So, so I knew that I knew that they didn't read, but I assumed that because I wrote a thing and that they were in it and represented that they would. I was concerned about my mother's reading in particular, because when I had given her a sneak peek of what I was writing, it was upsetting. Now, I will say that I went home shortly after the book was initially published to have a community conversation. And like I was given Wednesday night Bible study time. About Sweetwater. And so, and I kind of braced myself, and I had all of these things that I wanted to talk about, intellectualizing their lives. And what I realized when I was talking about all of these themes from Sweetwater is that ain't nobody in there read my book except mama, my sister, my auntie had read it. They hadn't read it. They had it. They wanted me to sign it so they could probably showcase it and be like, I know her, but they didn't read it. So it's, and that has been probably good and bad. But the person that I can speak to that that had the most transformative experience, I believe, was my mother. Because even that night, she was able to share how proud she was, not just of me, but of that story, right? Because she was initially ashamed and embarrassed. And she never asked me to take anything out or write something differently, but it was the first time she had seen particular truths back at her, mirrored back to her of her experience. And she was afraid of what people would think, when they saw that version of her life that she had kept hidden. And so when she talked about, when she got it, and she understood why it was important, and she understood that it was her story, but it was ours, hers and mine, but ours, the Black community.
Collectively, yes.
Collectively. And that was a beautiful moment. And my aunt refused to have she thought, I think I was going to quiz her on the book. So she refused. She refuses to engage me about it. But it's been mostly positive interactions I've had. But honestly, I think I have to acknowledge that part of that is very likely that people haven't challenged my representations because they haven't read it. So if I do an audiobook one day, I can probably have a different conversation.
To listen to it.
They'll listen to it, but yeah, they're not going to read it. Yeah.
And by the way, it would make an excellent audiobook.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, definitely. So moving forward, what originally inspired you to want to practice autoethnography?
So originally, my intentions have always been to be a writer, not an autoethnographer, right? Yes. So when I initially was pursuing my master's degree at UNCG, that was because my attempts at getting in an MFA program didn't pan out, right? The MFA programs were, they required you to be a full-time student. And I had a full-time job and student loans to pay.
Sure,
so that's right. That commitment. So it kind of had to change my trajectory. So I was like, well, I'll get a degree and I'll just kind of figure it out. And while I was a master's student at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, at the time, Bud Goodall was the department chair. And we had a class, an intro to grad class at the time, where the faculty visited and shared excerpts of things they were working on that to introduce their work and to talk to us about their work. And when he came, Buddy read a story. And I was like, and so I leaned in because I was like, wait a minute, that was different from what anybody else was doing. And I was like, I can do that, right? So I leaned in. He talked about it in the context of this new ethnography, this narrative ethnography, autoethnography. I had no idea what it was, but I was fascinated, and so I worked with him. He mentored me. I took additional classes with him, and he helped me see that when I wrote personal stories, first of all, that I could tell my own, right? Because of course, at the time, I didn't feel I had permission to do so or that anybody would care, right? So I wrote fictional stories because I could make something up that someone would care about, but who would care about my lived experiences.
Mhm.
So kind of learning from him the importance of that, and him actually being interested in these everyday,
Mhm.
mundane stories of my life, either through conversation or when I wrote them down.
Mhm.
And so he introduced me to autoethnography, and explained to me that I could take these poetic stories and
Mhm.
situate them academically.
Mhm.
Um, and then later, as a graduate student at the University of South Florida, working with Dr. Ellis and Dr. Bachner, and learning how to craft that, I'm still learning, that creative voice with the academic one, and
Mhm.
marry them so that it was seamless, so that you could theorize your experience yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
Was just a remarkable journey. So it allowed me to be a creative writer and a scholar, which
Mhm.
which in my mind was, those things were oxymoronic. So to be able to do that and be that and live that and write like that has been an amazing experience.
Mhm. Okay. So who was the first autoethnographer of color that you read?
Um, the first autoethnographer of color that I read, I believe, was Irma McLaughlin, and it was a piece that she wrote about autoethnography. I don't know that I would necessarily characterize it as
Okay.
autoethnography. And then there was, oh, Carolyn, help me remember her name, Deborah.
Okay.
Uh,
Deborah.
Deborah from Composing Ethnography,
Deborah Austin.
Austin.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you,
Wow.
Carolyn. It was an edited collection that Carolyn had, and it was a poem. It was essentially like a poetic story,
Mhm.
and it blew me away. Um, it was gorgeous, and it was very, very Black woman, and that
Mhm.
was one of the first that I remember, that I can specifically recall, one of the first um, Black women autoethnographers that I read.
Okay. Who were some of your early mentors, and how did they help guide you during your doctoral journey?
So Bud Goodall, Carolyn Ellis, Arthur Bachner, um, Tony Adams, right? These are people who modeled autoethnography for me very directly through my graduate studies and my PhD journey and program. They have been instrumental in not just supporting the work, but showing me through their own experimentation and willingness to take risks that it's okay to do that. And they also kind of allowed me to um, do things experimentally that I try to encourage my own students to do, but it kind of is antithetical to everything that you were taught and told how to do
Yes.
a thing, and then it's like, okay, deconstruct that and do this different thing, or lean in and trust your gut, tell it how you want to tell it. But he would often tell me to write the story as if my mother would never read it, right? Do it first.
Good advice. Yeah.
Always edit it later, but that's how you get the good stuff. And so I think that they made it possible, and gave me permission to do it. And then there have been, you know, Black women autoethnographers like you, Dr.
Thank you.
Weems, like Aisha Durham, who have done the same thing, but in different ways, because my introduction to you guys was later, right? Like
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
after I was brave enough
Mhm.
to identify as an autoethnographer, there were then these other brave voices that were representing things and experiences and truths that created a chorus for me to join, so that I wasn't, because there haven't been, there were autoethnographies, but then there are Black girl autoethnographies, right? There's autoethnographies, but then there are autoethnographies of particular, very unique experiences that don't have to be situated or contextualized, right? And I think that's what I learned from other Black women autoethnographers was how to unapologetically tell the story and to tell it to myself and to other Black women, right? To kind of adjust the audience. Writing to myself and to other Black women allows me to tell a version of the story that that might require footnotes, you know, for people who are not Black women, but that open up a mirror so that we can feel seen and understood, which was, again, something that I was lacking in the earlier part of my own education, right? And so it's important for me to kind of create those landscapes for future scholars and upcoming scholars of color.
Okay, and so looking back, was there a moment after all of this help by your mentors and coursework that you had an epiphany that told you were ready to go out into the world and do your thing?
An epiphany?
Yes. Where you went, I got it. Okay.
I don't think I got that now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I am often humbled and amazed and surprised by the recognition of my work, right? I've never felt ready. And it never feels finished, right? Everything feels like it's a work in progress or it's a version. And I have been so many versions of myself since becoming an autoethnographer that it's like, I could tell a story so many different ways and go back and tell stories in different ways. So I don't think I've had an epiphany or particular moment, but I will say that I do have, I think every now and then I'll have a retroactive moment. I will read something I wrote and be like, damn, I wrote the hell out of that, right? Like I did that. But it's always in an unexpected moment, you know, when I'm researching something, trying to pull something together, but it also reminds me I can do this. You know, you got it. You got this. You can do this. But it's always fleeting.
All right. If Bud were here and you could say something to him, what would you say right now?
Thank you for seeing me and my voice. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what do you envision as the future of autoethnography? Where is it going? Where are we going? Where would you like to see us go?
Where is it going and where would I like to see us go? So I think that, you know, it's still emergent, but it's also very established now. So it's not quite as scary of an endeavor as it was, or as it felt when I was initially doing it. And when, you know, the pioneers were kind of, because they took the darts, right?
Yes.
So that when I was doing it, nobody was like, well, what is that? They might challenge it, but they're not asking what it is. And so and now I think we're at a part at that wave where people are like, I like you, like, I want to do more of that, right? So I think that autoethnography is going to become even more accessible and useful across disciplines and outside of the academy, right? So, and that kind of links to where I would like to see it go. I would like to see it become more mainstream. I would like to see that word be understood outside of an academic context, you know, to where people know what autoethnography is and means without it having to be kind of locked in the academy. Very much like feminism, right?
Yes.
It's a thing that needs to live and breathe in the world, but it's so grounded in the academy that people resist it because they're like, I don't understand what that is, because it's, you know, the more accessible we make things, you know, I think the better, and more people have access to it, because I think autoethnography has life-saving capacity, right? People being able to be empowered by storytelling their own and others. That's a powerful thing, and it shouldn't be locked in the academy. At the same time, I think that it's really important that it not be, because the thing about ideas that travel either within or outside of the academy is that they oftentimes get watered down.
Yes. Yes.
They become different iterations, and you know, and then it kind of loses what it is.
Censored.
Yes, absolutely. Censored and co-opted in ways that it was never intended. Because I think that what makes autoethnography needs to be consistent wherever it goes. And so I hope that it finds a way to move in different places and become more recognizable. But I hope that it never loses its theoretical grounding. I hope that it never loses its capacity to be a method,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And regarded as a method, and not just, you know, pretty writing. I remember when I gave my first presentation, autoethnographic presentation at the Carolinas Communication Association. It happened to be in Greensboro that year, and Buddy was chairing a panel that I was on, and I remember being terrified. So I'm sure the delivery was terrible. You know, I think the writing was good, the delivery was probably terrible. And someone came up to me after and was encouraging, but said that was really good literature.
See?
And I didn't know if that was shade, right? Like I was like, right? You know, because it's like, yeah, but it's also this other thing, you know? And so I think being able to recognize that scholarly writing can be beautiful, and it should be. It shouldn't just be, you know, jargonistic, indecipherable words on a page. It should be delicious. And I want to write and read delicious autoethnography. And so I'm hoping that more people can access it and that it remains delicious.
Me too. And the thing that I think about is when you want your writing to make a difference in the world needs to read it and be exposed to it. I mean, as long as it stays within the context of the academy, we can pass our stories among ourselves as much as we want to, but until they get out into the world, what's going to change?
Exactly. Exactly.
So what advice do you have for young Black girls today interested in attending college? What would you tell them? Or what do you tell them?
For Black girls interested in attending college, my advice would be go away to college, right? Leave.
Yes, me too. Yes, yes. Don't stay home. Yes.
Don't stay home, right? I think that the most life-changing thing I ever did was leave home.
Yes.
And leaving home for college wasn't quite as dramatic as leaving for grad school, right? Because it was down the road, but it was still far, you know?
Yes.
My mama couldn't she had to call first, make sure I was around, right? And I think that is important, you know, for Black girls in particular. You need to be exposed to the world outside of the one you grew up in, and get out of that bubble, right? And kind of expand it. And I don't think you can do that if you're too close to home. And that doesn't mean you can't go back home. It doesn't mean you don't move back home, but it means that at least that you can't really learn.
Yes.
You can't learn what you need to learn about yourself, about the world, when you're still tethered in a particular way to where you come from. Or particularly, you know, and for me, I came from a small town. So there was a lot of small town socialization and a lot of small town thinking, right? That I had to unlearn, that it took me years to unlearn. And I carried that with me to college.
Yes.
But it started, you know, it started getting broken up by being away, right? Because when you go home and you try to, and I'm telling my family, this is what I'm learning about, they're saying that's not what you need to be learning about. Now, mind you,
Yes.
how you know? You ain't been to college. But you telling me that the thing I'm learning is not the thing because it's different, right?
Right.
Because it's
Yes.
not, because it's outside of what we know. And so I think opening yourself up and just taking the risk, leaving home, and doing it scared, because it's a terrifying thing, but it can be, but I think it's a necessary thing. So go away to college. In other words, try to get money, get funding.
Right. Yeah,
Doing that, right? So maybe it's not an out-of-state school, which is more expensive, but just a couple of hours from home, so that you have to, get thrown in the deep end of the pool and you have to learn how to swim on your own.
You better believe it. You better believe it. I couldn't agree more. When you come in contact with young Black girl scholars who are just beginning their careers in the academy, what advice do you share with them?
Okay, so can I share that I had a conversation with a Black woman a couple of months ago now, I think it was. She was interviewing me for something. And then at the end, she said, she was like, she was being very affirming, and I really admire your work and thank you so much. And I'm standing on your shoulder. And I was like, you ain't standing on my shoulders, right? Like, wait, I'm not,
Yeah.
like, wait a minute now.
Yeah.
I haven't been doing this that long. I'm not that, right? Because, I was like, the people going to be standing on my shoulders haven't been born yet. Right? Like I'm not
I don't know about all that. Yeah.
But, right. But I think, but then I kind of had to think about what she was saying and then think about, well, hell, you have been doing this for a really long time, so even though I kind of think, I don't think about myself, I don't think about time. It goes so fast that sometimes I'm like, oh, wow, I've been doing this for a long time, decades, right? So there are things that I know that are valuable, because I think that the thing that I was trying to do was put stories in the world. And so when Black women are entering the academy, and they have that storyline that exists because I put it out there.
Yes.
That is, that is remarkable. And so I think that I would encourage them to be true to themselves and be themselves unapologetically.
Yes.
And consistently, right? Yes. Regardless of whatever consequences there may be around that. And I think it's also our responsibility in the academy to create spaces that are safe for them to do that.
Yes.
Safe for them to do that, right? So I have the leverage now because, hell, I guess grown people are standing on my also grown shoulders, right? So it's like, how can you establish space for them to tell their truth, to tell their stories, and to be themselves authentically, to not have to water themselves down, to not have to whitewash themselves, not have to silence themselves for a job, right? And so I think that that's the thing. And if you're in a space that doesn't allow that, then you're not in the right space. And that's within the academy or without, right? Your space lets you give you space to grow. You can grow in your space. If you're constricted, that's not your space. Find another space.
Find another space.
Yeah.
Yes. I know that's right. Right. And so if there's is there anything else you'd like to share with us before I open it up for questions?
Well, I think that the other thing that I think about as it relates to this work and the importance of this work, and this work as an offering, a love offering, and a representation of Black women's experiences and agency, I think about the way that any individual Black woman's story is a universal Black woman's story. And this is something, Mary, actually that you taught me and that you shared with me, and that you have demonstrated through how you express visually autoethnography on the page. So that's something that I would love to anchor this conversation in terms of if you can kind of explain that, explain the auto/ethnography as a, precedent for Black woman autoethnography.
Well, for me, I always think of myself as part of being Black, as part of a collective. So anytime I write, I'm not writing in I, which is why the slash is there. I'm always writing with the collective ancestry, Black folk I know and Black folk I've never met that I've heard about in mind. And I'm always trying to stay open to empathy and the importance of being connected to the creator, so that whatever I'm supposed to say and write comes through me to the page. And so the individual I have no interest in, even though I use I when I write, that I has an us, we embedded inside it. And I don't think I would be, even though I couldn't articulate this, of course, when I started writing at 13, but I don't think I would be the writer I am without that clear understanding and centering of my Black self and why it's important for me to speak always for us and also against injustice.
Love that. So yeah, that's it. That's the final word.
Okay, all right. So with that, I want to thank everybody who is here. If you have a question for Robin, please chime in. Don't everybody speak at one time.
Hey, Robin, Chris.
Hey.
I just want your permission to one day I'm gonna have the guts to do this. I want to quote you and with "damn," I wrote the hell out of that at the end of one of mine.
Absolutely, yes.
No, I was gonna ask what you're working on right now. Like, what are you writing today? What are you into?
So this is actually something that I've actually talked to you about, Chris. I think I on a panel a couple of years ago at, I can't remember if it was ICQI or NCA, but I did this piece called, Fear of a Blank Page. This fear of running out of words and running out of stories. And I was sharing this with Mary recently, like just last week, that the biggest fear I have is that I've told all the stories, or that, I don't have anything else worthy of saying. And I had been working on a book project that was just, it was just hard. And writing had never been hard. It's, and I think that's why I was like, do I just not have anything to say? But I think that I gave myself permission after writing so much, not as Buddy would every day, right? And I know that you have that practice as well, write and then edit and then write and then edit every day. I'm not a writer every day, but when I am and it's inspired and it's beautiful, that's great. But I've been so damn tired because I've been out here writing, hustling, editing, trying to get promoted, doing all of these things. And then I'm realizing, well, hell, that's why you don't have words. You're tired. So I've kind of given myself permission to kind of take a reprieve. Now, I've written a couple of things. I've written some scripts for my commentary. I've written, a couple of short essays for the remix, just reflecting on life things. I think the last thing I wrote was about musings about marriage and motherhood, right? And what it means to resist those societal expectations. And so everything is always, all of my writing is always anchored in my insistence on living my own truth and acknowledging and critiquing the expectations of culture and society on Black women in particular, but on everything. And so I think that right now, there's not a thing that I'm working on currently, like in this moment. There are projects that I have in the back burner, but I am so blissful to say, I ain't working on nothing. I ain't doing nothing. I ain't writing nothing. Other than, I'm pulling together the journal, my inaugural issue of my journal, but I'm not writing anything actively. And I feel really good about that. But something will come.
All right. Thank you. Chris, who would like to go next?
I'll go next. I have a whole lot of things to say. I will try to control myself. First, Mary, your questioning was just fantastic, perfect. The two of you really worked well together. It was lovely to watch.
Thank you.
And Robin, I am so proud of you. And if Buddy were here, and I think he is in some form, he would just be busting with joy and pride for all you have accomplished. He had some understanding of your talent and your spirit. I think he would still be surprised at just how far you have come and how far you are still going to go. And I have no doubts about that.
Thank you.
I will, though, I'm going to add to his advice to you, as a good mentor should, and he's not here. He's not here to then add to mine. But, so he told you that to write so you're as though your mother wouldn't read it. Mm-hmm. And I would just add to that to write so that your mother could read it if she could.
Right.
Yeah.
And you do that. I think, your relatives who have read some of your work, I think, have been amazed at it. And I'm wondering, because I had this experience with them. I mean, you and I kind of, even though you're Black and I'm white, we still had similar class backgrounds, and we've often shared some of our experiences and similarities. And I think at least for a while, I became somebody my mother didn't recognize. And I just wonder, does your mother recognize you now?
That is a great question. Because I struggle with how becoming myself and coming into myself makes me so entirely different, right? So different from my family. But yes, I think she does. I think she does. I think she understands that I'm different inherently, but that I am who I was supposed to be, who I was always supposed to be. And so she recognizes it. She doesn't always, I'm sure it's indiscernible at times. But I like what you said about writing so she could read it, because I think that we have our relationship has translated to me being able to be this version of myself without losing who and whose I am. That will always, I will always be Bettina's daughter, and she sees me every time she sees me, I think. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn. Who would like to go next?
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Danielle Joy Davis. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri.
Welcome.
From the St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri, excuse me. And I've been contributing all day. This is my first conference for this group, so thank you for all to put it together.
Yes.
But my question is connected to what you mentioned, Mary, related to the idea of autoethnography. But still, even though it's autoethnography, there's a strong sense of we. And the question is for both of you, really. I just would like your thoughts and understanding related to it in terms of, like the idea of what it took to bring me about in every way, you know, in terms of culture, race, environment, you know, it's multifaceted. And because it's so multifaceted in terms of impact, research impact, and in terms of research dissemination, in my mind, the way that I've brought about that we component that I think you touched upon, Mary, is I have chosen to deliberately co-author. So to give you an example, I've co-authored in terms of autoethnography with my mother, who's 77 and still fabulous. I've co-authored with aunts, with uncles, with cousins, and even my own son. And I feel like when we engage in this autoethnographic journey together to explore who we've become as a family, that the very act of engaging in the process is my way of not only promoting impact in terms of we, but also research outcomes in terms of we, right? That's just the way I think about it in my own head and the way I practice it. But I was just very curious for the both of you two young ladies, and please forgive me if I missed it, but what are ways that you envision promoting this sense of we in terms of research impact and research outcomes and dissemination in the future? You know, because what you've done thus far is wonderful, but are there any like shifts or changes that you hope to participate in the future in this idea of, yes, autoethnography, there's the I there, but you know, I'm a part of this Black diasporic African community, and that's me talking. So I'll mute myself, and I'm just really excited to hear your responses, both of your responses to this. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
we have about 4 minutes. So I'm going to say, Robin, please go first.
Okay, I will be, very brief. I think that part of when I think about the trajectory or kind of creating space for this kind of work for the future and what I think is possible in the future, I think that establishing space so that those types of stories are necessary, are needed, and are looked for, right? Because when we think about research, one of the things, when we think about research impacts, right, whatever that means within the academy, it is how many times, it's citation practices, right? It is what kind of venues things are published in. And so I think that as we as the academy opens up to autoethnography, we have to make sure that autoethnographies are represented in these unusual spaces and that we're citing them, right? So part of the community conversation for Black women and Black scholars is that we need to be aware of each other's work and amplify it through citation. And so that's my initial input in terms of of community and research output.
And then my answer is, I see my job as one of doing it as much as I can for as long as I can, not only getting it published, but also bringing it to life as a performer for an audience. And then third, to encourage any young scholar or anybody out here who is not a scholar, but performing and writing out in the so-called public space, to understand the importance of continuing to write and writing with we as a perspective, as opposed to the individual competitive I. And that's where I'm at. And I just want to say in closing that, Robin, not only do I love, admire, and respect you, you give me hope for a better future with more Black women and Black girls learning to do what it is we do, to take this social justice autoethnographic writing on into the 21st century and into the next one, because the struggle definitely continues, and it's the stories people remember.
Absolutely, I agree. And the relationship between storytelling and social justice, I think, is a strong one, and it is definitely at the center of the work I will be doing moving forward.
Okay, all right. And with that, I will say thank you all for coming. This has been very good. Robin, we will talk soon to debrief.
Yes.
And y'all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you.